In 100 minutes, let's go from a prime to a fully painted Warjack. Welcome everybody to this episode of Speed Painting. I'm Jason, the creator of the Tabletop Battlefield. And if you're new here, well, this series is all about understanding that while we all want to win a golden demon, the reality is we really don't have the time to paint all of our miniatures up to that standard. So we want to end gray plastic, or in this case, silver pewter miniatures. So today, we're going to take about 100 minutes and I'm going to show you how you can paint up a light Warjack from Warcaster Neo-Mechanika. But this technique would probably work well for any of the Warjacks from War Machine as well. And frankly, any kind of medium-sized robotic type thing can work with these types of paint techniques. Now, two standard rules always apply to these speed paints. One is that the miniature is already primed. In this case, I'm using a black spray primer. And number two, in order to hit that 100-minute goal, we don't factor in letting the model dry between coats. It's especially true if you have washes and things like that. So in order to hit that goal, ideally you'd have several of these miniatures lined up to do a batch painting process. Alright, with that out of the way, let's get started. With any given Warjack, you've got roughly 3 parts to it. You've got structural pieces, which kind of like the legs, some of the arms. You've got armor shells, which are obviously the pieces that are armor that protect things. And then you've got the weapons. And then in this case, you've got a shield and some cooling stuff too. So I'm going to start here with the structural components. I'm going to give them a basic gray coating. So just a medium gray, completely coat those areas. If you do get some of the gray paint on the armor areas, don't worry about it. It's not that big of a deal. I think I'm going to paint part of the cooling fins gray. So I'm just putting some gray paint on kind of the inside lines of those, but I'm trying to avoid the hex areas because I'll be doing a different color on those sections later. We're going to let those areas dry for a little bit because the paint being thinned down is going to be a little wet. So now what I'm going to do is take some more of the gray and we're going to dry brush up all the armor areas. And you're looking for maybe about 50% gray coverage on those armor panels. You still want some of the black showing through. If you accidentally put a little too much of gray in the armor panels, it's not a big deal. This is all about applying paint really fast and not worrying so much about exact amounts of paint and details like that. So step 3 in this process involves a wash. I'm going to be using a black wash here, in this case non-oil from Games Workshop Citadel line of paints. And I'm going to be applying this to all the mechanical areas, but not the armor areas. If you do get a little bit of slop, no big deal, but try to focus mainly on the mechanical areas. So while that wash is drying, we can work in the armor areas a little bit. And I'm going to take some silver. I got a metallic silver color from Army Painter's line of war paints. And I'm going to dry brush that over the dry brushed gray that we did a little bit earlier, looking for maybe 25 to 40% coverage of the entire armor area. So once again, you want some of that gray as well as some of the black still showing through. This next step requires a little bit of brush control. It's not too bad because we can fix your mistakes kind of easily. But I want to start working on the hex patterns here on his cooling fins. So for that, I'm going to use a blue color. I got a dark blue base color, Cantor Blue from Games Workshop Citadel line of paints, because I've got a bit of a blue glowy thing going on with my colors, but obviously this color should be whatever you use for your glowing stuff. And you want to take a detail brush. In this case, I got my Artificer Layer extra small brush. And I want to very carefully just apply a little bit of paint to each of those hexes. It don't have to be perfect, but you want to try to avoid getting paint in between the hexes, but like I said, we'll fix that in another step in just a moment. Since more time is going to be required to let the wash dry from our few steps ago, let's start working on the shield. I'm going to paint most of the raised areas a base of gray. Now there are a few that I've picked out that are going to glow, and leave those black for now. Of course, the ones that you want to glow, well, that's obviously a choice you could make, because clearly I just picked a few arbitrarily that I think would look cool. And with these pieces, be sure to paint the sides too, and you'll see there's a bit of a reoccurring theme here. A lot of this process is designed to be a bit forgiving. So if you get some paint on little hex panels around the area, don't worry, we'll fix it later. There is a reason why we paint things in a certain order, and it's usually because certain types of paint areas are easier to fix than others. Next step is to take some more of that dark blue we're using as the base for the hex colors and go over the shield with that color as well. like before, try to avoid getting the paint in between the little areas. One thing I'm not painting is going to be the edge of the shield. I'm going to give that a much brighter glow later on in this painting process. So one more step with all the honeycombs on the miniature, whether it's the shield or the little cooling fins. We're going to take some black wash and go over those areas, and that way you're going to restore those kind of gaps between the individual little hex panels. I'm also going to apply that to the entirety of the shield to give that a little bit of contrast as well. So we're going to return to the mechanical areas of the Warjack. I'm thinking my black wash in those areas is pretty well dry. And what I'm going to do is this kind of process between edge highlighting and dry brushing, where I take a tiny bit of a color and I apply it roughly along the edges, so you get kind of like this blended edge highlight look. So in this case, I'm going to be using my metallic silver color. I'm going to apply that to all the mechanical actuator areas of the Warjack. Now before we start applying any of the base armor colors, I want to work on the glowy parts. So for that, I'm going to take my base glowing color. In this case, I'm using a bright Temple Guard blue from Games Workshop's Citadel line of paints, and I'm going to run that in each of the areas that are going to be glowing. And this is going to be both on the body, where there's a few spots. I think the legs have a few spots, and the shield as well. I am not currently working on the hex areas around the miniature. I'll do those all towards the end. Step 2 of the glowy parts involves taking some white, mixing it in with that base color, and then putting a little dot of that lighter color in the middle of each of the glowing areas. Clean up our slop a little bit, but take a little bit of silver and kind of fix any of the areas where we screwed up and got some of the glowy paint outside onto the non-glowy surfaces. At this point, we can move on to painting the armor panels. I'm going to be using my base dark blue color, because that's what I'm going to use. And I want to give a pretty even coating over all of the armor panel areas. Now, the exception here, of course, is we've got this metallic gray base coating down, and the reason we have that is you don't have to cover up the entire panel. You want to leave some of that gray silver color through. It conveys the idea of weathering and battle damage, because you basically can see the bare metal underneath the painting. Plus, by having that there, it also kind of covers up some of your oopsies where you don't exactly go along the line of the armor panel correctly, you miss a little spot here and there. It helps cover that kind of mess ups as well. Now we're going to talk a little bit about highlighting and detailing your armor panels. Exactly what you do up at this point is really up to you, and it's definitely an artistic decision on your part you have to make. I like a camouflage look, one, because it's faster to paint, and two, it's just kind of what I go with. So I'm going to take a brighter blue color. I'm going to go up one step to Altdorf Guard Blue from Games Workshop's Citadel line of paints, and basically scribble this around the armor, kind of looking like your old school military armor patterns. Of course, though, if you want to do more traditional edge highlighting, you can do that instead of the camouflage pattern. Same techniques, just different ways of applying the paint. I got one more armor camouflage thing to do, so I'm going to take some white, mix it with my previous camouflage color to get a brighter one, and do some more camo stripes or edge highlighting if you prefer that style of painting. A lot of the big picture stuff is done. We're going to move on to some of the details, and we're going back to the shield. Now for the shield, we're going to start working on the hex patterns, and for that I'm going to apply a blue highlight color, in this case my glowing color, to each of them. Now you don't need to completely cover the hexagon. You want to put a little bit of dot of this and maybe cover 75% of each hexagon, so a little tricky, but just be careful with it and it'll get a nice cool glowing effect. Now let's take some white, mix it in with our blue glowing color to get that really bright white bluish color that we used earlier for highlighting some of the other glowing areas, and put a dot of that in the middle of each of these hexes, and that will really create the effect that he's got like a shield of glowing panels of some sort, I guess. Now we're going to give the shield a bit of its own edge highlighting glow effect. Let's go back to our base glow color. Maybe there's a little bit of white in there, it's not that big of a deal. And just do an outline of the entire shield in this color. Then let's take a really bright glowing color and do a much thinner edge highlight of the shield in that color. So take your base glow color. Oh, trying to give names to all these things is just always messy. Take some of that white, mix it in there to get that brighter color, and then, just edge highlight everything. And the final step for the shield is going to be to take some silver and apply that to some of the gray areas currently in the middle. Now we're going to finish up the cooling fins and do the same glowing hex pattern for those as we did for the shield. So let's start with our base glow color and put a little bit of that over most of the area of each of the hexes. Then take a tiny bit of the bright glowing colors and put a dot of that in each of the hexes. Cooling fins are done. Let's move on to the last few pieces and work first on the canopy here. Well, I guess it's not really a canopy, there's no guy in it, but what looks to be a canopy. So let's just coat that in our base glowing color, and then just take a little bit of the bright glowing color and run that down the middle just to get a little bit of contrast. Painting the weapons is pretty much like painting the rest of the miniature. I'm going to paint some areas that gray silver metallic color, and then the barrel areas or the blades are going to be the glowing color with a nice bright white edge highlighting if that's possible. And some of the areas are going to be closer to the armor panels in color. Alright, that last edition, we can probably call this Warjack just about done. And we're looking at a time of just a hair over an hour 46, but that kind of factors in a little bit of fudging around with video cameras and recording all my voiceovers. So you can probably get this done in 90 to 100 minutes if you sit down and really work at it. And there we go, your quickly painted Warjack is done and just about ready for battle. You really still gotta base it, but you know, it's kind of up to you how you want to handle those things. But thank you guys all for watching. Once again, I'm Jason, the creator of the Tabletop Battlefield. If you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button and hit that subscribe. I'll be doing more speed painting and some interesting little timing competitions up in the future here. I've got some more Warhammer terrain to work on, and I might pick a few new miniatures coming out and see how fast I can paint those. It's a fun little challenge. Now, if you want me to try and paint some miniature in a fast speed paint fashion, you can leave in the comments and I'll see if I can work that into the schedule. But other than that, I can tell you I'm coming up pretty soon here with finishing Micro Flash Delta, my 3-pound combat robot. I'm getting the final assembly of him done. So that video will be coming up pretty shortly here in the next few weeks. And I'm looking off my screen right now. I've actually got a Blender modeling tutorial I'm working on where I'm trying to use some of the physics simulations built into Blender for animations to use them for creating miniatures. And I'm creating a really cool looking, hopefully Halloween themed character. Then that'll probably be next week, I'm thinking. But we'll see how things go. You never know these days. Anyway, once again, for the second time, thanks for watching and have a great week. Ah, crap.